You may have noticed Turkey has been bouncing around the global stage these past few years, and somehow this mid-sized country has managed to challenge nearly every major power in international affairs and regional conflicts, yet walk away unscathed every time, and often with gains. Take China, for instance. Turkey has repeatedly voiced discontent over Xinjiang, making it one of the few Muslim-majority nations to openly criticize China on the issue. In Syria, Turkey once shot down a Russian fighter jet, directly testing Putin's limits. And even though it's a NATO member, Turkey still went ahead and purchased Russia's S-400 missile defense system, ignoring US warnings. As for Europe, Turkey didn't hold back either. President Erdogan publicly called then German Chancellor Angela Merkel an enemy of Turkey and urged Turkish Germans not to vote for her party, openly meddling in German domestic politics and causing diplomatic tension. Later, when Sweden applied to join NATO, Turkey delayed the approval for over a year by setting up multiple roadblocks. With such aggressive moves in all directions, you'd think, according to traditional international relations theory, that Turkey should have been isolated, maybe even sanctioned collectively. But reality tells a different story. Turkey's economic ties with China have grown deeper, making it a crucial gateway for China's Belt and Road Initiative into Europe. On the Russian front, Putin and Erdogan maintain a close personal rapport. Erdogan, in fact, is one of the rare leaders in the world who has managed to remain friends with both Putin and Zelensky at the same time. Look at the US. After just one phone call with Erdogan, Donald Trump was already working to lift sanctions on Turkey and Europe. Even as Turkey recently cracked down on anti-government protesters, European leaders have largely stayed silent, no longer daring to openly criticize Turkey's human rights record or democratic backsliding. This geopolitical paradox is fascinating. Many are left wondering, is Turkey's unpredictable behavior just opportunism, or is it actually a calculated, autonomous strategy? How is it able to pull off such a complex foreign policy? Today, let's explore the logic behind Turkey's diplomacy through three key dimensions. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, come join us. First, Turkey wears many political hats. It's a Muslim-majority country, yet also a secular democracy. It's a NATO member, the self-proclaimed leader of the Turkic-speaking world, and the inheritor of the Ottoman Empire. These multiple identities give Turkey the flexibility to shift its stance depending on the stage, always with calculated timing and leverage. Second is Turkey's unmatched geographical advantage. Straddling both Europe and Asia, Turkey is a vital bridge between continents. More importantly, it controls the Bosporus Strait, the only outlet to the Mediterranean for the Black Sea. In the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, that alone makes Turkey a geopolitical power no one can afford to ignore. Third, we have Erdogan's seasoned double game. He has masterfully intertwined domestic and international politics, using diplomatic victories to reinforce his authority at home, while leveraging nationalist sentiment to justify high-risk moves abroad. At the heart of all this lies a deeper shift. Turkey is slowly rewriting the foundations of its modern statehood, moving away from strict Kemalism. No longer content with being a junior partner in the Western order and equally unwilling to fully align with the East, Turkey now seeks to become a sovereign geopolitical force in a multipolar world. The vision is clear. By 2053, the 600th anniversary of the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople, Turkey aims to re-emerge as a global power, with the clout to shape international rules and order. Scholars call this ambition Neo-Ottomanism. So, in the rest of this episode, let's look at how Turkey balances its relationships with the US, China, Russia, and Europe, and how it leverages identity, geography, and strategy to push forward its Neo-Ottoman vision. Among Turkey's four key diplomatic fronts, China, the US, Russia, and Europe, its relationship with China is arguably the simplest for Erdogan to manage. The main source of friction between the two countries, Xinjiang. Many believe Turkey's outspoken stance on Xinjiang stems from a sense of ethnic brotherhood with the Uyghurs, often referred to as their Turkic cousins in the East. But genetically, that connection is quite thin. Studies show that modern Turks carry less than 16% Turkic ancestry, with over half tracing back to ancient Greek roots. Uyghurs, on the other hand, have only about 4.5% Turkic genetic markers, less than their East Asian, Persian, and even Arab ancestry. In fact, Northern Han Chinese carry nearly as much Turkic DNA, around 2.3%. So what really ties Turks and Uyghurs together isn't blood, it's language. Both Turkish and Uyghur belong to the Turkic language family, sharing similar grammatical structures and even many basic words. This linguistic and cultural affinity, coupled with a shared Islamic heritage, forms the ideological basis for Turkey's long-standing pan-Turkism, a nationalist vision that unites Turkic-speaking peoples across Central Asia. Within this framework, Turkey has been one of the few Muslim-majority countries to regularly speak out about Xinjiang. After the 2009 Urumqi riots, Erdogan condemned China's actions as genocide. During the Xinjiang cotton controversy, Turkey's foreign ministry issued strong criticism again. But since 2023, this tone has shifted dramatically. With inflation once soaring above 80%, Turkey found itself in a severe economic crisis, and China became a lifeline. In 2024, during a visit to Beijing, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan publicly declared Turkey's firm support for China's territorial integrity. Still, the diplomatic niceties couldn't completely mask deeper tensions. During his trip to Xinjiang, Fidan wore a blue and white tie, eerily similar to the colors of the East Turkestan independence flag. He also carefully avoided using the term Xinjiang, referring instead to historical Turkic Muslim cities. These subtleties hint that, while both sides may set aside disputes for now, mutual distrust simmers just beneath the surface. Economically, Turkey has reaped substantial rewards. China sees Turkey as a strategic gateway for the Belt and Road Initiative into Europe, backing major infrastructure projects like high-speed rail and nuclear power with huge loans. Chinese companies like BYD and Xiaomi have also begun setting up factories in Turkey, boosting local jobs. Meanwhile, the southern route of the China-Europe Freight Railway, bypassing Russia, passes directly through Turkey, making it a crucial logistics hub. What's more, a currency swap deal with China has provided Turkey with the equivalent of a $35 billion interest-free loan, offering vital support for its struggling foreign reserves. In essence, it's a textbook case of economic cooperation in exchange for diplomatic restraint. But even this pragmatic arrangement isn't set in stone. In 2024, Turkey abruptly slapped a 40% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, sparking outrage in Beijing and prompting a complaint to the World Trade Organization. The message is clear. If economic benefits start to falter, Ankara may once again put Xinjiang back on the diplomatic table. If Turkey's relationship with China is all about pragmatism in exchange for restraint, then its ties with Russia are far more complicated, defying the binary labels of ally or adversary. Historically, the Ottoman Empire and Tsarist Russia fought 10 wars, making them age-old geopolitical rivals. During the Cold War, Turkey joined NATO, becoming a frontline opponent of the Soviet Union. The Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey was once a key US site for deploying nuclear warheads aimed at Soviet territory. Given that history, you'd expect Turkish-Russian relations to be outright hostile, yet the reality is anything but. During the war in Ukraine, Turkey sold drones to Kyiv that were used to attack Russian forces, while simultaneously refusing to join Western sanctions against Moscow. Meanwhile, Erdogan and Putin have maintained strong personal ties, and Turkey has hosted multiple rounds of mediation between Russia and Ukraine. One of the most dramatic flashpoints came in 2015, when Turkish fighter jets shot down a Russian warplane, accusing it of violating Turkish airspace for just 17 seconds. Putin was furious, but limited his response to economic sanctions. No military retaliation. Why? Because he knew attacking a NATO member would trigger catastrophic escalation. But there's an even deeper reason. Turkey controls Russia's only maritime gateway from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, the Bosporus Strait. This narrow waterway isn't just a logistical choke point for Russia's Black Sea fleet. It's a vital artery for Russian exports of oil, gas, and grain. Over $200 million worth of goods pass through it every day. If Turkey ever decided to close the strait, the Black Sea fleet would become a Black Lake fleet, stranded and powerless. That's why Turkey can repeatedly challenge Moscow, whether by downing its jet, backing anti-Assad rebels in Syria, or supporting Azerbaijan in its war against Armenia, without triggering a full-blown Russian response. This isn't a sign of Putin's weakness. It's a reflection of Turkey's unmatched geographic leverage. In 2023, while Russia was bogged down in Ukraine, Turkey seized the moment. It backed Azerbaijan in a lightning offensive to retake Nagorno-Karabakh, effectively defeating Armenia and stripping Russia of its influence in the South Caucasus. Armenia, feeling betrayed, began distancing itself from Moscow, even demanding Russian troops withdraw. Meanwhile, Turkey used the Shusha Declaration to strengthen its military and political alliance with Azerbaijan, reinforcing its leadership among Turkic nations and opening what it calls a Turkic world corridor stretching into Central Asia. This entire saga illustrates a key truth. Personal rapport between leaders, like Erdogan and Putin, can coexist with intense geopolitical rivalry. Turkey continues to push Moscow's limits because it holds a knife to Russia's throat, geographically speaking. And Russia, despite its nuclear arsenal, treads carefully because it understands what's at stake. This isn't friendship. It's cold, calculated interest. And in this high-stakes game, Turkey has mastered the art of dancing on the red line without falling off. Turkey's relationship with the United States is perhaps the most awkward alliance within NATO. Outwardly cooperative, but internally fraught with mistrust and constant friction. As NATO's second-largest military force after the US, Turkey once played a vital Cold War role, serving as Washington's southern bastion against Soviet expansion. American nuclear warheads and air bases were stationed on Turkish soil, making Ankara a strategic anchor for US interests in the Middle East. But things began to sour, especially after President Erdogan took power. One of the earliest flashpoints was Syria. While the US backed Kurdish militias in the fight against ISIS, Turkey vehemently opposed them, branding these same militias as terrorists. That's because many Syrian Kurds have direct ties to Kurdish separatists operating within Turkey. The two NATO allies ended up backing opposing sides, often coming dangerously close to armed confrontation. But the most serious rupture came in 2016, following a failed coup attempt in Turkey. Erdogan accused the exiled cleric Fethullah Gulen, who resides in the US, of orchestrating the plot. Washington's refusal to extradite him deepened the distrust. Erdogan responded by purging thousands of pro-Western officials and military officers, severing the old ties that once anchored US-Turkey cooperation. Then came an even bigger shock to Washington. Turkey struck a deal to purchase Russia's S-400 missile defense system. The move blatantly defied NATO's interoperability standards and was viewed in the US as a betrayal. In response, Washington ejected Turkey from the F-35 fighter jet program and imposed military sanctions. But Erdogan didn't blink. Instead, he fired back, accusing the US of imperialist arrogance. Under the Biden administration, relations remained frosty. Turkey refused to join Western sanctions against Russia and repeatedly obstructed NATO's internal decisions, most notably by delaying Sweden's accession for over a year. To Washington, Turkey looked like an unreliable partner. To Ankara, the US appeared to be a meddling outsider with misplaced priorities. But everything changed in 2024 when Donald Trump returned to the White House. Trump has a known affinity for strong men, and his rapport with Erdogan is unusually warm. After a direct call between the two, the US began exploring options to lift sanctions and resume negotiations over military tech transfers. In parallel, Turkey was invited to play a central role in Trump's proposed Ukraine-Russia ceasefire talks, thanks to its unique status as the only country maintaining friendly ties with both Putin and Zelensky. In this new geopolitical equation, Turkey is once again indispensable, not just to NATO, but to the very idea of peace in Eastern Europe. This diplomatic thaw makes one thing crystal clear. Turkey is no one's sidekick. It's a strategic power broker capable of reshaping Washington's options. By playing both sides between the US and Russia, Turkey secures its safety through NATO while bolstering domestic support and diplomatic autonomy through an anti-Western stance. In essence, the evolution of US-Turkey relations perfectly illustrates the heart of Erdogan's Neo-Ottoman strategy. Turkey no longer wants to be a Western satellite. It wants to be a geopolitical power center, one that commands leverage, dares to push back, and demands a seat at the table. If Turkey's relationship with the US is one of drifting allies, then its relationship with Europe is a decades-long story of unrequited love. Since launching EU accession talks in 2005, Turkey has bent over backward to align with Europe, reforming its judiciary, modernizing its economy, and improving human rights. Yet nearly 20 years later, almost half of the 35 accession chapters remain frozen. The reasons are complex: democratic backsliding, minority rights issues, territorial disputes, and Europe's lingering cultural unease over admitting a Muslim-majority country. This prolonged state of stringing along without entry bred deep frustration in Ankara. Then came the 2015 refugee crisis, and suddenly the tables turned. As millions of Syrian refugees poured toward Europe, Turkey transformed from EU applicant to Europe's gatekeeper. In a dramatic move, German Chancellor Angela Merkel flew to Ankara and signed a landmark refugee deal. Turkey would hold the line on migrants, and in return, the EU would provide billions in aid and revive both membership and Schengen visa talks. But as the EU dragged its feet on promises, Turkey weaponized the refugee issue. In 2020, Turkey briefly opened its borders, triggering a flood of refugees toward Greece and sending Europe into panic mode. Ankara used the chaos to pressure Brussels for more funding and political concessions. This controversial strategy, turning humanitarian leverage into political capital, proved Turkey's growing sway over European policy. Meanwhile, Turkey's geopolitical importance only grew. With the Black Sea in turmoil and the Russia-Ukraine war raging, Turkey's control of the Bosporus Strait made it a critical NATO asset on the alliance's southern flank. Despite refusing to sanction Russia or sever ties with Putin, Europe couldn't afford to alienate Ankara. Yet even with Turkey's indispensable role, EU skepticism toward full membership hasn't waned. The reasons are political and ideological. Erdogan's continued crackdown on opposition figures, suppression of press freedoms, and the erosion of democratic norms have sparked outrage across European liberal circles. Historical disputes, like tensions with Greece and the unresolved Cyprus conflict, only make matters worse. Ironically, the more the EU delays, the less Turkey tries to please the West. Post-2023, Erdogan's administration shifted tone, emphasizing the Vision 2053 plan to mark 600 years since the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople by positioning Turkey as a global power, beholden to no civilization or alliance. Today, Turkey no longer chases EU membership with the same intensity. Instead, it prefers a flexible partnership built on cooperation and competition. It's simultaneously a critical ally and a constant ideological challenger, an uncomfortable but very real new normal in 21st century geopolitics. If you've ever felt that Turkey's foreign policy is erratic or inconsistent, you might be underestimating its strategic depth. What appears to be unpredictability is, in fact, a calculated dance, rooted in Turkey's multi-layered national identity and its deliberate pursuit of a multi-track, multi-vector grand strategy. First, Turkey is a Muslim-majority nation. While constitutionally secular, Islamic traditions deeply influence its social fabric. It stands out in the Muslim world as a rare power with industrial capacity, a robust defense industry, and regional leverage, giving it natural leadership potential across the Middle East and Central Asia. Second, Turkey is a NATO member and a long-time EU candidate. This gives it institutional access to Western systems, military, economic, and diplomatic, yet it refuses to fully embrace Western liberal values. On matters like media freedom or democratic checks and balances, Turkey walks its own path. Third, it positions itself as the leader of the Turkic world. Through shared language and culture, it cultivates pan-Turkic cooperation with Azerbaijan and Central Asian states. The 2021 rebranding of the Turkic Council into the Organization of Turkic States marked Turkey's ambition to build not just cultural, but economic and military influence across the region. And then there's its Ottoman legacy. For Erdogan's government, the Ottoman Empire is no longer a symbol of decline. It's a source of historic grandeur. Turkey must return to its rightful greatness is no longer a slogan, it's a doctrine. Thus, Neo-Ottomanism is not about reclaiming lost territory, but about restoring lost influence, repositioning Turkey as a pivotal power in the global order. This multi-identity structure gives Turkey immense flexibility. It can challenge Russia militarily while maintaining warm ties with Putin. It can buy US-made F-16s while purchasing Russian S-400s. It can criticize China's Xinjiang policy, but simultaneously embrace Belt and Road investments. At the heart of this strategy is Erdogan, a master tactician who maneuvers between global power centers to extract maximum leverage, then converts foreign policy victories into domestic political capital. His playbook fuses nationalism, pragmatism, and a media-savvy populism to sustain both his rule and Turkey's rising posture. Neo-Ottomanism doesn't seek to rewind the clock. It aims to stake a claim in a multipolar 21st century. Turkey isn't content to be a peripheral actor in the Western-led world order. It wants to be a self-sufficient center of gravity. Far from being a rogue or a spoiler, Turkey is consciously using edge balancing and strategic opportunism to reshape its international identity, even if this means taking risks that few others would dare. But how long can this high-wire act last? Will Turkey truly achieve its neo-Ottoman vision, or will it stumble into strategic overreach? That depends on three critical variables: the durability of its domestic political order, the tolerance of major global powers, and the shifting tectonics of the regional landscape. First, Erdogan's dominance is both a source of strength and vulnerability. Turkish diplomacy today mirrors his instincts. But post-Erdogan, will successors maintain the same strategic clarity, or will power struggles and ideological shifts trigger instability? Second, Western patience is wearing thin. While Washington and Brussels currently tolerate Turkey's defiance, another crackdown on dissent or cross-border aggression could provoke real backlash, cutting off access to vital partnerships. Third, regional volatility is a double-edged sword. The war in Ukraine, US-China tensions, and realignments in the Middle East all offer Turkey new openings, but also compound the risk of overextension. A flare-up in Kurdish unrest, an economic collapse, or a misstep with Russia could unravel its delicate balancing act. Culturally, Neo-Ottoman soft power has limits. Central Asian nations still resist Ankara's leadership. In the Arab world, Ottoman-era grievances remain fresh. Turkey's bid to become a civilizational magnet faces more pushback than embrace. Economically, deep-rooted issues like inflation, currency instability, and investor flight threaten the very foundation of its economic leverage for diplomatic influence model. So, yes, today's Turkey remains a remarkably successful balancer, a mid-sized power punching far above its weight. It may not become the axis of a new world order, but it is proving, with striking effectiveness, that geography, identity, and strong leadership can bend the arc of global politics. That's the reality of Turkey in 2025, and a strategic variable we must all continue to watch. The Past explains today and hints at tomorrow. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell. See you next time.